be able to make it today, but we're going to record these things. And if you've noticed on our new website, we have posted some of the Dharma talks that we've remembered to push the record button on. So between the two of us, you know, we'll get this together.
Let's go sit on the potty first.
So today, yay, we get to hear Roger. He's a very important person to me, and he's just a very important person, period. And he has been in Zen practice for a long time. He's taken Jukai with his teacher, Victoria Austin. He has another teacher now at Sadhuzan, and he's lived and worked at San Francisco Zen Center for many years. He's currently the Shika, and that means he is like in charge of everything pretty much. And it's true. So he's worked at both at Tassajara and at Green Gulch and at City Center. And he has 38 years of 32 years of recovery, which he's pretty much awesome all around. And today I asked him if he would give a way-seeking mind talk. And if you haven't heard one before, it really is a talk about what your journey was like to the spiritual place that you are now. And I wanted Roger to give one because I know he can give a really good one. And hopefully it will inspire some of you to want to do this yourself in the future. And so anyway, Roger.
Thank you, Cynthia. How long should this be?
Oh, 25
minutes or so. Okay. Well, thank you so much for asking me to speak. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here with all of you. And I think I've been to most of these Sunday gatherings of Selwood. Not all of them quite, but most of them. And I've really continued to enjoy them and consider it a real honor to speak to you today. So as Cynthia said, she asked me to give a way-seeking mind talk, but she also indicated I could kind of massage it a little bit. And so this I want to do that and not, it would be a little different if I was doing a straightforward way-seeking mind talk. So consequently, I'd like to start out talking about the Bodhisattva 4 methods of guidance and the way and the path. So that's kind of the general theme or topic of my talk today. So it will get to my way-seeking mind and the path that I have been on and am on. But I've been studying, in particular, the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance for a while now with my teacher, Cynthia mentioned, Ed Sadhuzan, who became my teacher a couple of years ago now. And they've been very, very meaningful to me. And Dogen, who was the founder, acknowledged as the founder of Soto Zen, which is the lineage that we practice at San Francisco Zen Center, and Selwood continues on as many others do. And Dogen wrote these 4 methods in 1243, and he wrote them initially for lay people. And they're known as the Shisho Bo, and they're part of the Shobun Genzo, or the treasury of the true Dharma Eye. So these 4 methods are giving, kind speech, beneficial action, and identity action. And they're all interrelated and support each other. So why am I talking about the Bodhisattva 4 methods of guidance? Very simply and very clearly, because you all are bodhisattvas. And we tend to think of bodhisattvas as, oh, that's like Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara and et cetera, these ancients from the past and people that we look up to, which indeed is true. But we are the same as our ancestors. In Pali, the direct literal translation of a bodhisattva is one whose goal is awakening. And I think by virtue of the fact you're here, that's at least one of your goals, maybe your primary goal. So we are bodhisattvas, and that very definitely influences our path, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. You know? So in this 4 Methods of Guidance that Dogen wrote, he said, when you leave the way to the way, you attain the way. And that's not as difficult as it might sound. In other words, he's saying, if you let things arise, if you be present, you leave the way to the way, you don't interfere, you don't force it, you don't try to be this or that, you allow whatever to come forward, you then attain that way. Now that's pretty amazing, because in my life, you know, particularly in my earlier life, it was always about striving and forcing and deciding, I want to be this and I want to be that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And once in a while it might have worked out, but by and large, it didn't generally work out. There's another fascicle called the harmony of difference and similarity. And it says, if you don't understand the way right before you, how will you know the path as you walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near. So a lot of this has to do, and as I've continued my practice and become more involved and deeper entrenched in it and allowed it to be, my progress is not necessarily way down there, or it's not right here. It's just what is. Progress is not a matter of that. And I know the path. How will I know it? Because I walk it. So to get specifically about my path, or my way-seeking mind, if you will, there's been like 4 major turning points in it. And by no means are they the only ones. And hopefully they will continue to be more so as time goes on. But these have really marked my life. And each one of these was when I left the way to the way, not necessarily consciously, but somehow it was, in many cases in spite of myself. So the first major turning point for me, I mean, I grew up in the East Bay across from San Francisco, and was a typical teenager, and, you know, ran around with cars and hot rods and all of that sort of thing, went off to college. And after my sophomore year, I moved back to my hometown. And one day I'm driving down the street in my red 56 Corvette, and I got a crew cut, and I'm about, you know, to go back to college for my junior year. And I'm a hotshot debater. You know, we're on the national debate team, and we go to national tournaments, etc. And I was like really into this whole thing. And I'm driving down the street, and in this town across from San Francisco, and I see a friend of mine walking by from high school, whom I hadn't seen for 2 years. And I stopped and said, "Hey, Jeff, how are you doing? What's going on?" And we were never real friends in high school, but we knew one another. We were acquaintances. But we started hanging out. And he was going to UC Berkeley, and I was going to San Francisco State. And we started talking. And so he told me he was going to Europe in the fall. He was going to go to Barcelona and go to the University of Barcelona. And I have no idea why. But I said, "Oh, do you think I can go too?" This was completely contrary to what I had set up in my life so precisely. And, you know, going to do, and with my Corvette and its junior year and hot shot and all of that stuff. I said, hey, do you think I could go too? I have no idea where this came from or why I said it. He said, yeah, I think so. He was getting on a charter flight and he said, I think I can get you on it too. So I said, great, let's go. So in the fall, we went off to Europe. And I spent a year there. There was many adventures, what have you. But I came back a very different person. It opened the world up to me. And that crew cut became long hair down to here, and in a fatigue jacket, and several adventures had gone on in Europe, and I worked in a factory in Germany, and I lived in a place in Barcelona, and spent time in Paris, and I hitchhiked around, and I came back a totally different person, went back to school, and didn't know what I was going to do, but I went back because I was receiving money, scholarship to go to school, and I had to spend it. And that was 1963. Well, that was a whole different world. San Francisco had changed dramatically in the time that I was gone. And so I needed a major, and I figured out something to major in, and I spent all my time in the art department. And I became, or I didn't try to become, I was a hippie. And I was right there in the Haight-Ashbury in the midst of it all. And I did light shows at the Fillmore and Avalon ballrooms, the psychedelic shows. And my entire life changed completely. I was a different person. And it was because I'd simply said to that friend of mine, oh, can I go? And he said yes, and I went. So I followed that way that was in front of me. I didn't resist it. I didn't try to create it. I had no idea what I was doing. Never went to school, by the way. My friend Jeff and I had a falling out just because we were under such cultural shock. And he went on without me, and I ended up working in this factory in Germany. And we later found one another 3 months later in Barcelona. But he had gone to school for 2 weeks and quit. So it was a year of hanging out, bumming around Europe, and I returned a different person. So that set my path for that point. And as I said, I was a hippie, and I moved to New Mexico, and I lived on 100 acres without running water and without electricity. And I was married there, and my daughter was born there. And then after a year, we went off to Boston to study macrobiotics, which we did for a number of years. But the second major turning point came many years later. It was 1987. And one day a friend came to visit me, and I made coffee. And you're probably familiar with those French press pots, glass ones where you press it down the grounds and such. And after the friend left, I was washing the pot and I broke the glass. And I said, oh, I'll go down the block and get a replacement. And then it struck me, there's no place to get a replacement. And then this thought came out of nowhere. Again, I left the way to the way, if you will. And a thought came, and it said, I should open a place and sell coffee beans and accessories. Now, this made no sense at all. None whatsoever. I kept telling myself, why do you want to do this? You'll have to work harder for less money. And I had a comfortable existence at that time. But I was possessed of this idea. And I spent a full year looking for a location and also learning about the coffee business. And a year later, I found a location, and I started working on it with a friend, building it up. And we had no permits, never thought of considering that. And, just building this storefront out. And it was so nice because I found a place to live above it. Meanwhile, I am I'm a real alcoholic and a drug addict. I'm a daily drunk around this time, public daily drunk. So anyway, out of nowhere, this idea came that I should open this shop and sell coffee beans and accessories. And we got almost done building it. And my friend said, what are you going to do with all this empty space out there? And I said, oh, put some tables in it. We'll serve some coffee. And I was adamant I did not want to serve coffee. But I went ahead and did it. And the most creative thing I did with this shop, which is now almost 35 years old and still running and doing very well and owned by my son, was I allowed it to become what it wanted to be. It became a gathering point, a community focal point, and was and still is an important part of the neighborhood. And now there's 3 other coffee places in that family. So there again, out of nowhere came this idea, oh, I should open a place and sell beans and accessories, which I followed. I followed that path. So as I mentioned, I was a daily drunk. And literally each day, very comfortably, there was a bar right across the street. So I could walk across the street and get drinks. And I would wake up in the morning, particularly the last 2 years of my drinking, and always felt like I would have the disease du jour. Meaning I felt so terrible, I said, oh, I think I've got heart disease. Or, oh, I think I've got cancer. And maybe it's tuberculosis. And then I found a cure each day. It was 3 drinks. So I'd have 1 drink to throw up and 2 to stop shaking. And then I could drink all day. And I never paid for my drinks at the bar. And I didn't have to stop at 2 a.m. because the bartenders and I were all friendly. And we just locked the door with the goal to get out before daybreak. And then I'd start all over again. So the third thing happened, strangely enough. Unbeknownst to me, I had hired 2 women to work for me in this coffee house. And one had 14 years of sobriety and the other 7 years. And they used to tell me they were saving me a chair. And I said, that's nice, but I've got 40 chairs right there. I don't need another chair. They were talking about saving me a place in AA. And so I knew about AA. It had a lot of chairs and it seemed like a lot of people were having birthdays. And I was so miserable that I went to my doctor, and I got a physical, complete physical and blood test. And I went back for the results because I was feeling like every day I had some deathly disease. And I went to see him and he said, oh, we've looked at all of the results of your physical. And he said, you're all right. And that was very physically, health-wise. And that was very bad news for me. I did not want to hear that. I was more, look at this mindset. Imagine it. I was more willing to have heart disease, cancer, tuberculosis, or what have you, than admit I was an alcoholic. Because he then said, you're all right. Have you ever thought of going to AA? I said, no, not at all. And it was 2 years later before I finally did. Now, what happened was strange. I was in the bar one night at 3:30 a.m. And I'm sitting there and there's only the bartender and myself left. And he was down at the far end of the bar. And I looked down there and his name was Eddie. And I said, hey, Eddie, I think I should go to AA. Now, why those words came out of my mouth, I don't know. I attribute it to what I call my higher power, or my Buddha nature, or my original face, what have you. But those words came out of my mouth and he looked up and he looked at me and he said, you know what, you're right. And then he said, when are you going to go? I said, okay, I'll go today. So once again, there was a situation where the way presented itself to me unconsciously, subconsciously, but unconsciously, unbeknownst to me. And so I went and asked one of those women if she would take me. I said, it took me a long time to get up the courage to ask her, even though I was a public drunk. But I said, would you, do you still go to those meetings? And she said, yes. Why? And I had to answer her then. And I said, well, would you take me? And she began to cry. And she took me to a meeting that day. And as we just mentioned earlier, that was 32 years ago now. Amazing, amazing. So, you know, the first turning point was like ending up in Europe. The second was starting this coffee house. And the third was getting sober. And then a strange thing occurred. So I had always been somewhat of a seeker, you know. I mean, in my hippie days, taking acid was a spiritual thing. And then I studied yoga and I studied Kabbalah and I studied astrology and all of these things. But I could never meditate. Meditation didn't work for me. It's too antsy. I always thought something should happen. And whatever happened wasn't what I thought should happen. I thought I should hear celestial sounds or see glorious colors, you know, levitate or what have you. So I was never satisfied with it. And as I said, I kept, you know, I practiced yoga over the years and some of the occult things, and they dropped away. But one day I decided I would like to take a vacation. And I didn't know what to do. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll find a yoga retreat. So I looked online and I found this yoga retreat in Tulum on the Yucatan. And it was being given by two people from Maine who I didn't know. And I didn't know anything about Tulum. But it said yoga and meditation retreat. So I went. And I spent a week there. And I found out I could meditate because I didn't have to get something. Particularly in our sort of Zen practice, we talk about a non-gaining mind. It's about being present. It's about being with the way. So I came back and a friend suggested, oh, if you like this meditation, there's a place in the Mission District called the San Francisco Buddhist Center. And why don't you check it out? And so I went and I took a course and I was meditating. And then one day I was in a AA meeting and I was telling this friend, I was all excited. I'm meditating. You know, I like it. It's really something. And this friend said, oh, well, why don't you go to San Francisco Zen Center? They have a Monday night program called Meditation and Recovery. And he said, come on, go. You'll know people there. So I had known about San Francisco Zen Center for 40 years, but never gone near it. And 40 years after I'd first known about it, I walked in the door one Monday night and I went to this meeting. And sure enough, I knew people there. And some of the people I didn't know, but I found very, very interesting. One of them being Cynthia Ziegler right there. She was in that meeting the first time I went. Well, I again followed the way. It presented itself. So I walked in that door and frankly, I haven't left. I mean, for 4 years, I practiced as a non-resident. But it just, my life began to blossom and change and open up. And I felt like I had to force it less and I could be more present with it. And I had a wonderful teacher, Shosan Victoria Austin, who had originally met or seen at an event for BKS Iyengar, the founder of Iyengar Yoga, 2 years before I even went to Zen Center. And then there was a program called Sangha and Recovery, which was a year-long program, and I went to that. And it blossomed from there. And then 4 years later, I decided I wanted to retire from this coffee house and turn it over to one of my sons. So I said, well, I can do that. I'm going to do that, but I cannot live upstairs and attempt to be retired. I'll be downstairs mucking around, causing everybody problems, myself included, trying to tell them what to do and how to do it. So I went, aha, again, I could move into Zen Center. So I pursued that and I moved in, and that's now 16 years ago. And as Cynthia mentioned, during this past, well, I moved in as they had a thing called Dharma Bridge, and that meant you could live there and pay rent, pay for your room and board and tuition. And it was a very nice, comfortable sort of existence. I mean, I didn't have to work in the temple. You have one little temple job or two, but I could go to my yoga classes and I go to meditate, and you're expected to follow the schedule. And I could go to AA meetings. And then this is very definitely another turning point, not one of the four, but it relates to the Zen Center one. One day, I mean, they started asking me to do things. And would you be the curator of the monthly art shows? And oh, we need a resident on the Zen Center board of directors. Would you do that? And then, oh, would you be the afternoon doan in charge of, the team that runs the meditation hall, hits the bells and the gongs and what have you. And then this was what really changed things. The Tenzo, or the head of the kitchen, one day asked me, she said, would you be Tenzo, or head of the kitchen, for 3 months while I go to Tassajara? And then that woman up there, Cynthia, was one of the ones, she encouraged me to do that. And I at the time, I wasn't sure, but I thank her for it today. It was a hell of a 3 months that turned out to be a year. And it was a very, very intense job, but one that, particularly with hindsight, I fully enjoyed. And I said, just that popped out of nowhere. But since then, I did it with the qualification that, okay, I'd like to earn a practice period at Tassajara. And so I did. And after that year, I went to Tassajara and I did a practice period. And then I went to Green Gulfs, etc. Anyway, if you follow the way, if you let the way be the way, you will attain it. And over a period of time, I've been more and more able to do that. Circumstances have conspired, if you will, going to Europe and opening the coffee house and getting sober and going to Zen Center to take me along a path. And I am more involved in it today than ever before. And I continue to study and I continue to practice. And it's my life. And I've been granted a very wonderful life. And today I can practice those bodhisattva 4 methods of guidance far more fully. I can, giving and kind speech and beneficial action and identity action are a part of my life today. And that's part of my relationship with all of you. And sometimes I'm skillful with it and sometimes not, but I can acknowledge it most of the time when I'm not skillful, or I can see it at least the next day or maybe the next week and make appropriate amends if necessary for it. So the way offers us all incredible opportunities to just blossom and be more present and be more helpful and more beneficial to everyone. And it offers us, that goal of awakening is especially given what you are here and what we all hear today. Thank you very much.